Hi, I'm here to talk about my case study, Module 13 for EDL 853. First, we're going to summarize the case. So we have Nottingham High School. It's the central hub of activity of the town of Dover, the only high school in Dover Unified School District. It serves 3,200 students. It was built in the 1950s. Most of the buildings are up to date and for state and local federal codes due to previous updates. However, due to lack of funds, 1/4 of the high school buildings are part of the original structure and not up to current federal and state codes. The district has also added relocatable trailers to provide for classroom space throughout the years. Next, we'll talk about the Hernandez family. They purposely moved their family to Dover so their 4 sons could attend school in the Dover Unified School District. Their oldest son would attend Nottingham High School and play football. The family had learned of Nottingham High School's academic and football success by reading the state directory identifying outstanding high schools in the state. Next, we have the student Miguel Hernandez. He was a starting quarterback for Nottingham's varsity football team. However, we don't know his age. He was the first sophomore to be ever appointed to this position in the history of the school. The town of Dover considered Miguel the most talented quarterback since the 1960s. He was a model football player. He showed great sportsmanship by encouraging his fellow teammates to do their best, was always early to practice, and stayed after to discuss upcoming games with the coach. The team needed a victory at the Friday night home game to guarantee a place in the semifinals competition for the state championship. Miguel was very excited for the game. His parents and brothers were sitting in the front row at the big game. Nottingham was behind. Miguel passed the ball to a teammate who ran the ball for a touchdown. Miguel was tackled by a defensive lineman as soon as the ball left his hand. Miguel lay motionless on the ground. He was transported by an ambulance to the local hospital. It was determined Miguel had a spinal injury and was paralyzed from the waist down. Miguel's family and friends helped him through the months of rehabilitation and keeping up with his schoolwork. When the doctors and Miguel's parents determined he was ready to return to school, his parents made an appointment with the school counselor, Miss Gussman. Miss Gussman is one of the high school counselors. She had a meeting with Miguel's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez, to discuss his return to school. His parents did inform her that he would be using a wheelchair and would need access to his classrooms. They did not see any need for additional services or accommodations. It was their belief he would be successful at school and he was eager to return to school. Miss Gussman did inform the parents Miguel would be able to return as soon as his doctors gave him permission to do so. 2 weeks later, Miguel did return to school following the medical release from his doctor. Miss Gussman did speak with Miguel after his first hour class when he returned his first day back at school. She informed him that he would no longer be taking biology class due to the biology class not being wheelchair accessible. He would be moved to another science class that would meet the high school graduation requirement but may not qualify as a college prep class. Next, we have the principal, myself. I did present Miguel with a special trophy to acknowledge his commitment to the football team and the school when he returned to school. Mrs. Hernandez called the office and made an appointment to meet with me. I was informed by staff she was quite upset. I agreed to meet with her that afternoon. During the meeting, Mrs. Hernandez informed me she was very upset about Miguel's change in schedule and demanded he be reinstated to his biology class. She stated he needed to complete the biology course to be able to attend the college following graduation. Mr. Hernandez arrived sometimes later with an attorney, Howard Carey. Attorney Howard Carey does represent Miguel Hernandez. He did question if I was familiar with the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. He stated Miguel had a right to a free and appropriate education. Miguel needed services which includes access to biology class and anything else that they deem necessary to ensure Miguel's rights are protected. Now we're going to take a look at the legal and ethical issues of this particular case. First, let's talk about the ethical concerns. There are considerable ethical concerns about not providing services for Miguel when he returned to school. That does damage the reputation of all involved, including the stakeholders. And unfortunately, it could end up on the local news or worse yet, in the national news. Secondly, let's take a look at the American with Disabilities Act, or ADA. ADA is a civil rights law passed in 1990 that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of life. Public schools are covered under Title II of the ADA, which covers public entities. Schools must provide two key provisions: 1, program access, and 2, an integrated setting to all people with disabilities. Schools may make structural improvements to existing buildings to allow access. However, structural accessibility is not required if there are alternate means of achieving program accessibility. For example, providing service at an accessible site, relocating a class or activity to a different room or building, having library staff retrieve books for students or teachers who use wheelchairs. ADA covers anyone who has a physical, sensory, cognitive, or mental disability of any level of severity. It covers academics, curricular activities, and athletics. Here is where Nottingham High School falters. Miguel is covered under ADA and was discriminated against due to his disability. It is unknown if it was willingly. I would like to think it is not, and was a case of lack of knowledge. Third, we're going to discuss the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, covering the Section 504 plans. Section 504 was enacted as a part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It was the first disability civil rights law to be enacted by the United States. ADA and Section 504 have the same definition. No qualified individual with a disability shall, by any reason such as a disability, be excluded from participation in or be denied the benefits of the services, programs, or activities of a public entity, or be subjected to discrimination by any entity. Section 504 does require schools to provide free appropriate education, or FAPE. Miguel is eligible under Section 504. He meets the three-pronged standard: 1, a physical or mental impairment; 2, that limits a major life activity; and 3, in a substantial way. Nottingham High School falters here also. A school who serves over 3,000 students should have policies and procedures in place for creating, implementing, and monitoring Section 504 plans. Fourth, we're going to talk about Individuals with the Disabilities Act, or our IDEA. Miguel's parents have not asked for additional academic support, nor have they asked for a formal comprehensive and initial evaluation. The school could enter Miguel in the SIT team process for the school to determine if he would qualify for a referral for a special education evaluation. After research-based interventions, data collection process, and parent permission, the school could do a formal comprehensive evaluation to determine if Miguel qualifies for services. His qualification for services would be determined by the IEP team. According to his parents, he has been able to keep up with his school work during his rehabilitation. Qualification for special education needs to show that his physical disability has a direct correlation to his ability to complete his schoolwork. This could include mobility services if he is struggling to functionally use his wheelchair to be able to access a school building. There is no mention of a concussion or traumatic brain injury, which would have a direct correlation to his ability to complete his homework. The IEP team would determine if Miguel would qualify for special education services and related services. Lastly, we're going to talk about the school board master policy. It is unknown who creates, implements, or monitors Section 504 plans in the Dover Unified School District. In most school districts, it is the counselor who works with Section 504 plans. It would be important to locate in the school board master policy. A school with a population of 3,200 students should have policies in place for the management of 504 plans. So, what has happened in this case? Upon Nottingham's star quarterback returned to school after a football game injury, which left him paralyzed from the waist down and using a wheelchair, Miguel Hernandez was given a hero's welcome, which quickly turned to confusion when he learned from the school counselor, Miss Gussman, who he would no longer be in biology class, a class he would need to get into the college of his choice. Because the class was not wheelchair accessible, causing great concern for the family, who reached out to the principal for a meeting after hiring an attorney for Miguel to ensure his needs were being met. So who's involved in this case? First, and probably most important, is the student Miguel Hernandez. He was the star quarterback for the high school. His age and year is unknown. He was injured in a home football game. The injury was a spinal injury severe enough to leave him paralyzed from the waist down. He has continued his schoolwork while in rehabilitation. He uses a wheelchair for mobility. He returned to school. The school warmly greeted him with an assembly and a trophy. Miguel was ready to resume his schoolwork, but was informed by the school counselor his schedule had changed and would no longer be able to take biology, a class he needed for the college of his choice. Second, we have his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez. They specifically moved the family to Dover for the sons to go to Dover schools and participate in the football programs. They did meet with the high school counselor to inform her that Miguel would not require any help with his schoolwork but would be using a wheelchair. They were concerned when finding that Miguel's schedule had been changed due to biology class not being wheelchair accessible. The parents did hire a lawyer for Miguel to ensure his rights were met. The parents did meet with the high school principal and myself to discuss their concerns about biology class. Mr. Hernandez did bring the lawyer to the meeting. Third, we have the high school guidance counselor, Ms. Gussman. Ms. Gussman is a high school counselor. Her age and years of service are unknown. She did meet with the Hernandez family. She did change his schedule due to accessibility of the biology class. She enrolled Miguel in a class that would meet graduation requirements but would not meet college requirements. It is unknown if she spoke to the administration about the meeting she had with the Hernandez family or if she had any concern about him returning to school. Number fourth, we have the principal, myself. I did award Miguel a trophy when he returned to school. I was unaware of Miguel's schedule change. I was aware of Mrs. Gussman's meeting with the family. I did have a meeting with the Hernandez family after Ms. Hernandez called to set up the meeting. I was unaware the family had hired an attorney and that attorney would be attending the meeting. I would hope I would have had many meetings which would have included the special education department and the counseling department to discuss Miguel, his return to school, and his needs when he returned. Lastly, we have Miguel's attorney, Howard Carey. Howard Carey was hired by the Hernandez family to represent and protect Miguel's rights as a person with a disability. It is unknown if Mr. Carey is a lawyer specializing in disability law. His age and years of practice are unknown. Mr. Carey was assertive in his tone of voice and his line of questioning. He asked questions rapidly and left no room for answers. So where is this happening? First, we have the town of Dover. It must be a town of some size. It has only one high school. The school is the central hub of activity for the community, and one can assume a large employer of the town of Dover. Next, we have Nottingham High School. It is not one building, but a series of buildings spread over a large campus. It was originally built in the 1950s. Some of the buildings have been brought up to federal and state codes, making them wheelchair or handicap accessible. Other buildings remain in the original 1950 state and are not wheelchair or handicap accessible. The district has also added relocatable trailers to provide classroom space. Number 3, we have the counselor's office. Ms. Gussman met with Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez to discuss Miguel's return to school. Ms. Gussman told the parents Miguel could come back following permission from the doctors. It is unknown if Ms. Gussman asked the Hernandez what Miguel would need to be successful upon his return to school. And lastly, we have my office, the principal's office. This is where I met with Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez and eventually Miguel's lawyer, Howard Carey. So what programs are involved? Once again, we have Nottingham High School, a building built in the 1950s, and not all of its buildings are wheelchair accessible. We need to talk about the general education classroom. Miguel was enrolled in biology and was completing the work during his rehabilitation. He was enrolled because of biology. He was unenrolled because a biology class is located in a building that is not wheelchair accessible. The class was not moved to accommodate him, nor was an alternate site allocated for his use. Then we have the School Guidance Counseling Department. The counseling department did not recommend a Section 504 plan for Miguel before or after meeting with his parents. Ms. Gussman, the high school counselor, changed his schedule without Miguel or his parents' knowledge. Now we have the Special Education Department. It can be inferred that the Nottingham High School had a director of special education or an assistant principal in charge of special education due to the size of the student population. It can also be inferred that the Special Education Department knew of Miguel's life-changing injury. It is unknown if Mrs. Gussman spoke to the Special Education Department. It is unknown at this time if Miguel would qualify for special education services. A comprehensive evaluation would have to be conducted to determine if he did qualify for special education and what services he would require. Lastly, we have the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Section 504. Miguel does qualify for a Section 504 plan. After a series of meetings with Miguel and his parents, the school should have created a 504 plan before his return to school. It would have allowed for a smoother transition and met his needs. Now we need to take some time to review and analyze the information that we have, and this is the slide that we're going to talk about, the stakeholders. First, the stakeholders, we have the town of Dover. It's a larger town with 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 1 large high school. The high school is the hub of the activity for the community. Dover is very supportive of the schools. Secondly, we have the parent volunteers. Parents are very involved with the schools and readily volunteer in the children's classrooms. Third, we have Friday Night Cheer Club. The community is very devoted to Friday night games. Most of the town goes to cheer on their teams to victory. Fourth, we have the school board. It's an elected school board of 7 members from the community. It is unknown the board policies on the Section 504 plans. And we would need to consider the damage that a lawsuit would happen. That would damage the reputation of the school board especially. Fifth, we have the superintendent, Dr. Harvey. He or she is very well liked by the community and has worked hard to build a relationship with the staff at every school in the district. What we don't know is what his or her connection is with Dover, if that happens to be their hometown, or they simply moved there to take the job. Next, we have the staff of the Nottingham High School. It is unknown how many staff members are employed at the high school or their knowledge of school board policies. And last, we have the staff of Dover Unified School District. It is unknown how many staff members are employed by the school district. Dover seems to be a very large district, so the number of staff could be quite large. At this time, we're going to talk about the different options that I have considered to rectify this situation. The first option I considered was to do nothing. There's absolutely no pros to that. There's no way that would be a good idea. There's way too many cons. It would damage relationships of all involved. The damage the reputation of all involved. It would risk news coverage, both local and national. I would risk my job. There would definitely be a potential lawsuit from the Hernandez family, which the school would probably lose. I would definitely have to find a new job with a bad reputation. Word of mouth matters. Education seems like a big field, but somehow we are all connected. The next option I considered is what I call the extreme option. First of all, we'll discuss Ms. Gussman. In this extreme option, there would my take would be very harsh with the staff that I work with at school. I would have a harsh punishment for her infraction. I might consider firing her. I would speak harshly to her in front of the Hernandez family during the meeting with the family and Miguel's lawyer, calling into question her competency as a high school counselor and her knowledge of 504 plans. I would demand to see her notes of the meeting with the Hernandez family along with any email correspondence. I would take her off the case and place Miguel with another high school counselor, and I might choose to reassign Ms. Gustman to a menial position not fitting her credentials. Second, we'll talk about the counseling department. They would also have harsh punishments for all guidance counselors. Speak harshly to them collectively and not individually, which might let them explain themselves or give them a chance to say they too were concerned for Miguel and thought he needed a 504 plan, but were too uncomfortable about speaking their minds. At a minimum, they would have letters of reprimands in each of their files, and I might consider firing the head of the counseling department. Third, we'll talk about the special education department. Once again, a harsh punishment for the director or principal over special education department. Speak harshly to them and question their abilities to do their jobs and control their staff. And at minimum, there would be letters of reprimand in their files. Next, we'll talk about the general education biology teacher. Once again, a harsh punishment for the biology teacher. I would speak harshly to the biology teacher about their lack of caring for Miguel and call into question their commitment as a teacher, not bothering to ask him or her if they knew anything about Miguel's schedule change. Call the biology teacher into the meeting with Miguel's parents and lawyer and demand to know why his schedule was changed. Next, with Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez, I would not be harsh. But I would tell the Miguel's parents he will have a Section 504 written immediately. He will have a new guidance counselor. He will be placed in a biology class in a building which is wheelchair accessible. Or if they like the biology class he was in, will be moved to an accessible location. He will also qualify for an IEP, which would grant him an IEP spelling out his special education services and related services by the end of 2 weeks. Try to firmly place the blame on someone else, Ms. Gustman, counseling department, special education department, and the biology teacher. Next, Miguel's attorney, Howard Carey. I would be willing to grant any services Mr. Carey deems appropriate, whether they are feasible or not. The superintendent and the school board would simply be left out of the conversation. The pros to this particular approach is it does eliminate the lawsuit. Miguel would have a 504 plan and the Hernandez family and Miguel's attorney would be satisfied. The cons, however, are more lengthy. First, it damages the relationships with Miguel and his family because I am unwilling to take responsibility for the situation in any way. It damages all relationships with my colleagues and staff. It damages my reputation as a fair and impartial principal. Damages the reputations in the Nottingham High School. It does place Miguel on an IEP, which he may not require, and actually supersedes the special education department altogether. The last option, and what I'm calling my choice, is first of all, I would need to speak with the superintendent, Dr. Harvey. Have a frank discussion with Dr. Harvey before meeting with the parents, take notes on his or her suggestions, and talk about the board policies. Secondly, Ms. Gustman. I would need to have a discussion with her before meeting with the Hernandez in my office, thanking her for all her work she had done with the Hernandez family. She is a valued member of our staff. Discuss board policy on Section 504 plans. Stand firm but not harsh. She may be defensive, feel guilty, or justified in her actions. Ask her what she thinks Miguel needs to be successful at school. Ask her if she will need help completing the Section 504 plan and offer to help. Let her know I will need to see the plan before it is finalized and we will hold the meeting together. Thank her again for her help and service to the school district. Number 3, the counseling department. And we need to have a discussion with the department head of the counseling department to discuss the board policies for Section 504 plans. We need to discuss on where the breakdown in services occurred and how that can be rectified. We also need to discuss if the policies are up to date and if 504 committee exists. Be sure the counseling staff has additional training in this area, which we handled by the head of the counseling department. If not, we could use an outside agency. Then, if the policies are not up to date and the committee does not exist, we need to make plans to update the policies with counseling staff, primarily the head of the department. Be sure to set a date for when the new updates should be completed and the committee formed. Ensure that Miguel's biology class is being reinstated as in an accessible location for him. Lastly, create a timeline and due date for Miguel's 504 plan to be completed and implemented. The fourth is the special education department. Need to have a discussion with the director or assistant principal in charge of special education in my office before meeting with the family and the lawyer. Ask for clarification about Miguel's qualifying for services and related services. If it is decided he could qualify for services, discuss a timeline for that, and thank he or she for their time. The fifth, we have the biology teacher. We need to have a discussion with the biology teacher and let he or she know that they are greatly appreciated and thank them for working with Miguel during his rehabilitation. Have a discussion about moving their class to an accessible location. Be ready for the teacher to feel uncomfortable with this and look for solutions. Some teachers will be willing to move their classrooms to a new location for that hour or all day, and some teachers will not. Thank the teacher for their time. Let them know you will have a decision in a few days. Next, we have Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez. We need to have, obviously, a large discussion with the Hernandez family. During that time, I need to be sure to take responsibility for the situation. State very clearly that his schedule will be corrected. Explain that the school will work on a new location for his biology class, which is wheelchair accessible. However, he may be in a new biology class or may have a class one-on-one with his teacher. Be very clear that this will take some time, but no longer than a matter of days. Reassure the family that he will be placed on a Section 504 plan, which will address his needs to be successful at Nottingham High School. Ask the family to email you any information they feel needs to be added to the 504 plan. Set a date for the family return to discuss the plan. Reassure the family that you are there for them and Miguel. Let them know to call you or email you if they have any questions. Try to answer all their questions honestly and in a caring manner. Try not to be condescending. The family has been through a very trying time. Thank them for their time and their commitment to their son. Next, we have Miguel's attorney, Howard Carey. Try not to be argumentative with Mr. Carey. Explain you do understand there is some work to do to ensure that Miguel will be successful at Nottingham High School. Explain the plans for Miguel, the Section 504 plan, and reinstating his enrollment in biology class, which is accessible to him. Lastly, we have the school board. Ask for an executive session to discuss the Hernandez family's concerns and the fact that they have hired an attorney. Explain my plans to rectify the situation, and explain my plans for updating the school board policies for Section 504 plans and creating a committee if it is needed. So let's talk about the pros of my plan. This allows all of us to maintain our relationships. It maintains my reputation as a fair and impartial principal. It manages the risk for a lawsuit. And most importantly, Miguel receives the services he requires to be successful and graduate from high school. Cons? There are none. So now we'll talk about the steps to implement my plan. Number 1, complete discussion with the Hernandez family and Miguel's attorney, Howard Carey. Check the board policies on the section of 504 plans and if there is a committee. I need to meet with the superintendent, Dr. Harvey. Speak with our school attorney. There's a number of meetings that I need to have with Ms. Gusman, the counseling department, the special education department, the biology teacher, the Section 504 committee, and the school board. Number 6, we need to ensure Miguel's schedule is corrected and his biology class is in a wheelchair accessible classroom. Ensure Miguel's Section 504 plan is created and implemented. Hold a meeting with the Hernandez family and Miguel. Periodically check with Miguel and his family. Check the websites for policies and update them if they need it. Begin or continue weekly emails for all staff. And lastly, a discussion with the superintendent, Dr. Harvey, about the need to update the remaining high school buildings. Okay, that concludes my presentation. So thanks.